All right, it's official. The Red Bull is a tractor, and Max Verstappen is driving the absolute wheels of that car. I mean, tractor. This man just came out of nowhere and put the Red Bull on pole where it had no business on being on pole. Just look at the qualifying evolution from Q1 to Q3. Like, he was the only driver who consistently gained about half a second every single session. That is insane. And to put everything into comparison, look at Yuki right here. Yuki matched Max in Q1. He was pretty much the same, but couldn't make any other progress. Like, he remained at that pace throughout all three sessions. It was almost as if you push the car to the limit, it wouldn't comply, and you can't really extract any performance unless you're Max Verstappen. Let's look at the McLaren's. So overall, they seem to be pretty much on the limit in Q3. And both the drivers kind of had a flipped session where Norris extracted a lot more in Q2 compared to Oscar in Q2, but then wasn't able to extract that much more in Q3, whereas Oscar didn't extract much in Q2, but was able to extract a lot more in Q3 and was able to push the car towards the limit. And since both of them were around the same, I think the McLarens were really at the limit. It was just give or take how much additional performance they could have gotten out of that car. And if you look at Russell, he had a really good amount of improvement in Q2 compared to Q1, but in Q3 he really didn't make that much progress. And that's why he finished P5, whereas I probably would have expected him to finish maybe P4, considering over the last two races. I think the Mercedes is slightly quicker than the Ferrari, and I really do think Leclerc just outperformed that car. Like, he was able to gain consistent amount of performance over the three sessions. And that's evident in the fact that Hamilton did not make any progress in Q3. And you can see, like, the triangle is somewhat right on top of the square, where a square indicates the Q2 time, whereas a triangle the Q3. So he did not make any inroads in Q3, and that's what led him to pay the price. And you can see how tight it is between P5 to P9. And I think even P10, like, if Behrman had put in a solid lap, I think he would be somewhere around here, and that would have put him in contention as well. But anyone could have pipped anyone else for a higher spot. As summed up by Alex's amazing word choice, everyone between P5 to P10 could have been P5, especially the guy in P5. I mean, mind blown. Let's add that to the words of wisdom, shall we? But you can see in this chart, in the time delta gap to P1, that P5 to P9 were extremely close, where they were just separated by 0.06 seconds, 600ths of a second, and that's extremely close. The same with P1 to P3 is about 44 thousandths of a second. And for the top three being separated by that much, that's insane. However, if you look at the time delta gaps for the Japanese Grand Prix in 2024, McLaren were about 3/10ths off the pace, similar to how Russell and Leclerc were. They're about 3/10ths this year. And over here, you can see Norris was about 3/10ths off the pace to Verstappen, similar to how far Russell and Leclerc are now to the McLarens. But this plot also shows how far back the rest of the grid was compared to the top teams. Like, you can look at, if you ignore the top four teams over here, you can see the rest of the grid was somewhere around 1.2 to 2 seconds adrift from the leaders. And that's a huge gap. Whereas this year, you can look at all the midfield teams over here. They're all in the mix. And even if one top team missteps, they can take advantage of it. Just how Hadjar jumped Lewis. Like, Lewis didn't make any improvement in qualifying. And then Hadjar had a perfect lap and he was able to slot in P6. So this time, the midfield teams, they're a lot closer, and they're a lot closer to the top teams as well. So anything and everything is up for grabs. And to show the extent of the progress each team made, I compared the fastest laps and plotted the gains they made year over year. You can see the midfield teams made a huge amount of progress to close the gap to the top teams. Like, look at Alpine, Haas, and Williams. And Williams in particular made about 2.1 seconds of improvement. That is huge, whereas the top teams only made about 1.2 to 1.3, 1.4. So comparatively, the midfield teams covered an additional zero point 0.5 seconds. So that's why they're a lot closer this year compared to last year. And among the top teams, McLaren were the biggest gainers with almost 1.5 seconds. And that's why they've kind of been able to leapfrog everyone else and have a margin of about like 2/10 to 3/10 compared to everyone else. Because Ferrari only gained about like 1.3, Mercedes a little bit over 1.4, and Red Bull was the least with about 1.2. And I think even this is inflated a little bit because I believe Max Verstappen is just outright outperforming this car. So that's why it seems to be a much larger improvement, but I think the car is really tough to drive, as shown by Liam and Tsunoda in just 3 races. And Max is just making miracles happen. But yeah, and as far as the race is concerned, I do think that McLaren still hold the advantage. I do think that they have the highest performance gap compared to the rest of the teams, and they do have a really good race pace. So it'll be really interesting to see how Max defends against them now that he has track position. And Japan isn't the best tracks to overtake. You need to have a significant advantage. So I'm really curious to see how the race turns out, and I hope it'll be an exciting one.